To everyone around us, Julia and I appeared to be the epitome of the perfect couple. Our friends often said we were their benchmark for what a happy relationship should look like. We hosted frequent dinner parties at our house, where laughter and clinking wine glasses filled the air. I'd grill steaks, and she'd prepare her signature appetizers, effortlessly engaging our guests with her charm and grace. Together, we were a seamless team, moving through the night in perfect sync, exchanging looks that spoke volumes. People would glance at us and say, "You two just get each other, don't you?" And we did, or at least, I thought we did. Outside of these social gatherings, our weekends were an Instagram-worthy collection of activities. We'd wake up early, grab coffee from the local cafe, and drive out to the countryside for a hike or a picnic. I remember the mornings we'd spend watching the sunrise by the lake, wrapped in blankets, sipping coffee while the world slowly came alive. There was a quiet serenity in those moments. The kind where words felt unnecessary because just being together was enough. In those peaceful silences, I felt like I had everything I ever wanted. We would take turns planning trips, spontaneous weekend getaways to the mountains, cozy bed and breakfast stays, or beach days that ended with us watching the sunset hand in hand. It wasn't just the adventures that made us feel invincible, it was the day-to-day life we built. We were the kind of couple who shared everything, or at least I thought we did. We had inside jokes, the kind that make people feel like outsiders when they catch a glimpse of your private world. She'd catch my eye across the room during a party, and without saying a word, we'd burst into laughter, knowing exactly what the other was thinking. We had routines, comfortable, predictable routines that felt like the foundation of something solid, something lasting. Cooking together after work, watching our favorite TV shows curled up on the couch, lazy Sundays spent reading books side by side. These little rituals gave our lives a rhythm, a shared harmony that made everything feel steady and right. Whenever we went to family gatherings or met up with old friends, people would comment on how good we looked together. "You two are relationship goals," they'd say. My brother once told me he envied how easy Julia and I made it all look. And I believed him because it did feel easy. We never fought over the little things. We made decisions together, listened to each other, and found ways to compromise without either of us feeling like we were giving up too much. I trusted her implicitly, and I believed she trusted me the same way. I could never imagine us being any other way. Even our friends looked up to us, turning to us for relationship advice as if we held some secret formula. Sometimes they'd joke about how we should write a book or start a podcast on how to maintain a perfect relationship. We'd laugh it off, but deep down, I took pride in the fact that our connection seemed unshakable. Julia was my partner in everything, not just in love but in life. We made decisions together, planned our future, and talked about where we'd live next, what vacations we wanted to take, and even how we'd design the nursery when the time came. We had a life mapped out, a future full of possibilities, and for the longest time, I never once doubted that we were both on the same page, moving toward the same goals. The people who knew us would say that we were like two halves of the same whole, effortlessly intertwined. I thought that too. Julia had this way of completing my sentences, knowing my thoughts before I even said them out loud. It wasn't just love, it felt like destiny, like we were meant to find each other in a world of chaos and uncertainty. I was the grounded one, logical, structured, and always thinking ahead. She was the spontaneous, creative force who added color to my otherwise neatly planned life. Together, we balanced each other out perfectly, or so I believed. Looking back now, it's hard to pinpoint the exact moment when the cracks started forming because, on the surface, everything seemed so pristine. It's like when you look at a photograph of yourself, smiling, unaware of the flaw hidden behind the picture-perfect moment. To everyone else, we were still the same couple, still putting on that show of unity and love. But the truth is, while I was admiring the reflection of us in the eyes of others, Julia's attention was elsewhere. I just didn't see it then. One morning, as I was getting ready for work, something caught my attention that I couldn't quite place at first. Julia had already left for her office, and I was finishing up in the bedroom when I noticed it. Her jacket, which she'd casually tossed over the back of a chair the night before, was lying there like usual. But as I passed by it, I caught a whiff of something unfamiliar. It was subtle but distinct enough to make me pause. I reached for the jacket, trying to figure out what it was that felt so off. The scent wasn't overpowering, but it lingered, clinging to the fabric in a way that didn't feel accidental. It wasn't her usual perfume, not the light, floral fragrance I'd come to associate with her. This was different, stronger. There was a sharp, woody note to it, almost like sandalwood or cedar, with an undertone of something musky. It had a distinctly masculine edge. For a moment, I stood there, inhaling the scent, trying to rationalize it. Maybe she'd been testing out a new fragrance, or perhaps it was just something she'd brushed against on the subway. But deep down, I knew this wasn't the kind of smell that lingered by accident. It was too personal. I took the jacket into my hands, lifting it closer to my face. The smell was stronger near the collar, like it had been worn close to someone else's skin. I couldn't help but think of all the times I'd pulled her close, burying my face in her neck, breathing in the soft, familiar scent of her. But this was foreign, invasive, almost as if another presence had left its mark on something so intimate. The idea unsettled me. My mind began racing, trying to come up with logical explanations. Maybe it was just cologne from a colleague. She worked with a lot of men, after all. She was always in meetings, close quarters. But something about that explanation felt too easy, too convenient. I tried to shake it off, telling myself I was overthinking. But that scent, that unmistakably male fragrance, had embedded itself in my mind. It gnawed at me in a way that I couldn't quite put into words, a subtle alarm that I didn't yet want to acknowledge. As I hung her jacket back on the chair, my thoughts drifted back to the night before. She'd come home late, saying she'd been out with coworkers after work. It wasn't unusual. Julia's job often required her to network, attend work functions, or grab drinks with clients. She'd seemed tired but in good spirits when she walked through the door. I remember kissing her on the cheek as she kicked off her heels and made her way into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. Everything had felt normal then, but now, in the light of day, with that scent still lingering in the air, I couldn't help but wonder. Had there been something different about her last night? A slight distance in her eyes? Or was I only seeing it now because this strange, unfamiliar smell had triggered some latent suspicion in me? I tried to replay our conversations in my head, searching for anything out of the ordinary, any sign that she might have been hiding something. But nothing stood out. Everything had seemed so normal. Too normal. I stood there for a few moments longer, staring at the jacket as if the answers might reveal themselves if I just waited long enough. But there was nothing, just that lingering scent and the uncomfortable feeling that it left behind. Eventually, I shook my head, trying to clear my thoughts. It's nothing, I told myself out loud. You're being ridiculous. Still, as I left the room and headed out the door, that scent followed me, clinging to my thoughts just as persistently as it had to her jacket. A few days after the unsettling discovery of that strange scent, something else happened. It was one of those quiet evenings at home, nothing out of the ordinary. Julia had gone out for a late dinner with some colleagues, and I had been left alone, flipping through channels on TV and trying to shake the thoughts that had been gnawing at me since that morning with her jacket. When she got home, she headed straight upstairs to her office, saying she had to finish a few work emails before bed. I didn't think much of it at first. Julia often brought work home, and it wasn't unusual for her to spend an hour or two catching up on things before turning in for the night. But as I wandered up later, wanting to say goodnight, something caught my eye on her desk. It was a small, crumpled piece of paper, half hidden under a pile of documents. Curiosity got the better of me. I picked it up, feeling a strange sense of foreboding before I even read the words. The note was brief, just a few scribbled lines, but the impact it had on me was immediate and intense. Thanks for yesterday, E. I stared at the words, my heart sinking into my stomach. The message was vague, too vague. It could have meant anything. But paired with the scent on her jacket just days before, my mind raced to fill in the blanks. E. Who was E? Why were they thanking her for yesterday? And what had happened the day before? I stood there, the note still in my hand, my brain desperately trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe it was just work-related. Maybe E was a colleague, someone she had helped on a project, or a client she'd met with. But why would a colleague leave a handwritten note, so informal, so personal? The handwriting itself felt rushed, almost intimate. It wasn't typed or sent as an email, it was physical, private. I knew I was jumping to conclusions, but I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just some innocent thank you. Something about it felt wrong, too close, too familiar. I folded the note carefully and placed it back where I found it. My pulse was quickening, a cold tension settling into my chest. It could have been nothing, just a simple message from a coworker. But combined with the scent on her jacket, it didn't sit right with me. For the rest of the night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. As we lay in bed, Julia next to me, I kept hearing the words over and over in my mind. Thanks for yesterday. I felt the weight of the note in my head, heavier than it should have been for something so small. I wanted to ask her about it. But I didn't. I didn't want to sound paranoid or controlling. I told myself I was just overreacting. But even as I closed my eyes and tried to sleep, the suspicion was there, gnawing at the back of my mind like a splinter that wouldn't come out. The following day, I couldn't stop thinking about the note. My mind kept replaying it, twisting the words around, searching for hidden meanings, any clue to explain why it bothered me so much. I wasn't the jealous type, but something about this felt different. It was the combination of little things, the scent on her jacket, the mysterious note, the way she'd been a little distant lately. I knew I had to bring it up, even if just to clear my head. That evening, as we sat together after dinner, I casually mentioned it. I found a note on your desk the other day, I said, trying to keep my voice light like it was no big deal. Something about yesterday, from someone named E. Who's that from? I saw it immediately, the subtle shift in her posture. The way her eyes flicked away from mine for a split second too long before she forced a smile. Oh, that? She said, a little too quickly. That was from someone at work. I helped him out with a report or something, no big deal. Her tone was dismissive, but there was something in her body language that didn't match her words. She seemed tense, like she was trying too hard to brush it off as nothing. Normally, she'd look me in the eye and explain it with ease. But tonight, she was avoiding my gaze. And her movements were just a little too stiff, her laugh a little too forced. The air between us felt thick with something unsaid. As much as I wanted to believe her, that old feeling of doubt started creeping in again. There was an awkward pause, one I hadn't expected. She quickly changed the subject, steering the conversation away from the note, and for the first time, I felt like I was losing her, like she was pulling away from me emotionally. I watched her as she spoke about her day. But I wasn't listening. I was analyzing every word, every gesture. Her responses felt rehearsed, her smile too practiced. Normally, we had this natural rhythm in our conversations, a back and forth that flowed effortlessly. But now, there was something else in the room with us, suspicion, secrecy. I could tell she was uncomfortable, and that only made me more suspicious. Why was she so eager to change the topic? If it was just a harmless note from a colleague, why did she seem so tense when I brought it up? Was it because she knew I'd connected the dots? Or was I just imagining all of this? That night, as we went to bed, she kissed me goodnight like always, but it felt different. There was a distance between us, something unspoken but undeniably present. I couldn't help but wonder if she sensed that I was onto her, that my trust in her was starting to unravel. As I lay there, staring at the ceiling, the thoughts swirled in my head, becoming louder and more insistent. The note, the scent, her evasiveness. It all pointed to something being wrong. Something I couldn't yet name but could feel in the pit of my stomach. One evening, while Julia was in the shower, her phone, which was lying on the nightstand beside me, started buzzing. Normally, I wouldn't have paid any attention. Her phone rang all the time. Work, friends, emails, it was constant. But this time, something was different. The ringtone was softer, almost hesitant, and the name that appeared on the screen wasn't one I recognized, Andrew. The moment I saw that name, my gut twisted with a strange sense of unease. I couldn't explain it. Andrew. A perfectly ordinary name, one that shouldn't have meant anything to me. But in that split second, a rush of all the little suspicions I had been trying to ignore over the past few weeks came flooding back. The scent on her jacket, the cryptic note, and her evasiveness when I asked about it. And now, this. The phone continued to ring, the name glowing on the screen as if daring me to answer. I hesitated for a moment, my heart pounding in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, that I should just let it go to voicemail. But something inside me, some primal instinct, urged me to pick it up. It was a quiet voice at first, whispering in the back of my mind, but growing louder with every second that passed. I glanced toward the bathroom. The sound of water splashing, Julia humming softly to herself, unaware of what was happening outside. I felt a sudden rush of guilt, knowing that answering her phone without her permission crossed a line. But the name, Andrew, echoed in my head. I couldn't shake the feeling that I needed to know who this person was. And more importantly, why they were calling at this time, with her in the shower. Before I could talk myself out of it, my hand reached out, almost on autopilot, and I answered. I held the phone to my ear, my pulse quickening as I waited for the voice on the other end. For a moment, there was silence, just the faint sound of breathing. Then, a man's voice, casual and familiar, cut through the quiet. Hey, you free yet? I miss you. The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I froze, my breath caught in my throat. He had spoken so naturally, so intimately, as if this was just a normal conversation between them, like he was used to calling her like this wasn't the first time. I miss you. The weight of those 3 words settled heavily on my chest, suffocating me. For a moment, I couldn't respond. I didn't know what to say, or if I should even say anything at all. The man, Andrew, seemed to be waiting for a response. His voice full of anticipation, completely unaware that it wasn't Julia on the other end of the line. My mind raced, trying to process what I had just heard. Was this the man from the note? The one who had thanked her for yesterday? Was this the same scent I had smelled on her jacket? A surge of anger mixed with disbelief welled up inside me, but I still couldn't speak. I just sat there, clutching the phone, listening to Andrew's breathing, his words echoing in my ears. I miss you. I couldn't shake them. Those words were meant for her, not me. Those words confirmed what I had been dreading all along. Suddenly, I heard movement from the bathroom. Julia was turning off the water, getting ready to step out. Panic set in. I couldn't let her know I had answered her phone, not yet. I couldn't confront her without knowing more. So, without saying a word, I quickly hung up. The room was eerily silent now. The only sound was my own heart pounding in my ears. I sat there for a moment, staring at the phone in my hand. Still processing what had just happened. It was real. There was no denying it now. This wasn't some figment of my imagination, some paranoid suspicion. There was a man, and he missed her. And she hadn't mentioned him once. The bathroom door creaked open, and Julia stepped out, wrapped in a towel, her hair still damp. She smiled at me as if nothing had changed, as if everything was perfectly fine. Hey, babe, she said, reaching for her phone on the nightstand. My pulse quickened as I watched her check the screen. Her face unreadable for a brief moment before she casually tossed the phone back onto the bed. How was your shower? I asked, my voice betraying nothing of the storm brewing inside me. Good, she said, smiling. What are we doing for dinner? I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask her who Andrew was, why he missed her, why she hadn't told me about him. Instead, I just smiled back, my mind already spinning with questions and the horrible realization that our relationship wasn't what I thought it was. That night, I lay next to her in bed, listening to her even breathing as she drifted off to sleep. But sleep wouldn't come for me. All I could think about was that voice on the other end of the line and those 3 haunting words, I miss you. I tried to act normal in the days that followed the unexpected call, but the words I had overheard, I miss you, echoed in my mind, gnawing away at me. It was impossible to shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. The suspicion, which had started as a faint whisper in the back of my mind, had now grown into a deafening roar. I knew I had to do something. I couldn't just let this go, not with everything pointing to the possibility that Julia was hiding something from me. One night, after she had fallen asleep, I found myself wide awake, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing with unanswered questions. The air felt thick with tension, even in the stillness of our room. My thoughts kept circling back to that call. To the name, Andrew, to the way she had avoided my gaze whenever I asked about her work lately. I couldn't stand not knowing any longer. I had to find out the truth, even if I wasn't ready for what it might reveal. I waited until her breathing became slow and steady, the soft rise and fall of her chest signaling that she was deep in sleep. Quietly, I slipped out of bed, careful not to make a sound, and tiptoed to where her phone was charging on the dresser. My heart pounded in my chest as I picked it up, the faint glow of the screen illuminating my trembling hands. I hesitated for a moment, a wave of guilt washing over me. This felt like a betrayal, like crossing a line that could never be uncrossed. But then I reminded myself, I wasn't the one who had betrayed us first. Whatever I was about to find, it was better than living in the dark, better than letting doubt slowly eat away at me from the inside. My fingers trembled as I navigated to her messages, my breath shallow and quick. I wasn't entirely sure what I was looking for, but I knew exactly whose name I needed to search for. Andrew. I typed it into the search bar, and within seconds, there it was, the thread of texts between them. My heart sank as I saw how frequently they had been messaging, far more often than any casual work relationship would justify. The first few messages were polite, professional, even discussions about meetings, work deadlines, nothing out of the ordinary. But as I scrolled further back, the tone changed. Slowly, subtly, the messages became more personal, more familiar. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. When can I see you again? The words blurred in front of my eyes as I read them, each one a dagger twisting deeper into my chest. The thread went on, stretching back for months, revealing a hidden relationship that had been growing right under my nose. Andrew wasn't just a colleague, he was something much more than that. My fingers tightened around the phone as I continued scrolling, feeling sick to my stomach. I wasn't just reading texts anymore. I was uncovering the emotional wreckage of my marriage, message by message. It wasn't just casual flirting, either. They had shared intimate details, talked about their stolen moments together, the secret meetings after work, the romantic dinners, the nights I thought she was working late. I miss waking up next to you, one message read, followed by a heart emoji. I loved seeing you today. It's getting harder to pretend everything is normal when we're in the office. Another said. My grip on the phone tightened as I scrolled faster, my pulse racing. They weren't just exchanging pleasantries, they were talking about planning their next meeting, reminiscing about nights they had spent together, and discussing how they would keep their affair hidden. It was clear that they had built something between them, something real, something I had been blind to. One message, in particular, stopped me cold. Let's meet at the usual place. I'm counting down the minutes until I can hold you again. I felt my breath catch in my throat as the reality of it all sank in. Julia wasn't just having an affair, she had a whole secret life with this man, a routine, a usual place. This wasn't a fleeting mistake, this was something deliberate, something calculated. Every text I read confirmed what my heart had been trying to deny. She had been spending more time with him than I had ever imagined, investing in this other relationship while pretending to be my loving wife. I could almost see the moments they described. The hotel rooms, the secretive glances across the office, the lies she must have told me every time she came home late or went out with coworkers. Each message painted a clearer picture of the deception, making the affair impossible to deny. My stomach churned as I reached the most recent messages. Just hours before, while we were sitting at dinner, she had been texting him, making plans to meet the next day. She was right there in front of me, smiling, chatting, pretending like everything was normal while secretly arranging another rendezvous with him. I felt my hands shake, a mix of anger and heartbreak flooding through me as I read his latest message. I miss you already. Tomorrow can't come fast enough. I stared at the screen for what felt like an eternity, the full weight of her betrayal crushing down on me. My mind raced with 1,000 questions. How long had this been going on? How could I have missed it? Was anything between us real anymore? I felt a lump rise in my throat as I slowly set the phone back down on the dresser. Careful not to wake her. She was still asleep, blissfully unaware of the storm that was brewing inside me. I wanted to confront her, to wake her up and demand an explanation, to scream and ask her why she had done this to us, to me. But I couldn't. Not yet. I wasn't ready to face her, not with all the raw emotions still surging through me. I needed time to process and to think. As I crawled back into bed beside her, I lay there, staring at the ceiling, my mind spinning with everything I had just uncovered. The truth was out now, and there was no going back. Everything I had thought about our life together, our marriage, had been shattered in the span of a few stolen texts. Julia shifted beside me in her sleep, murmuring as she snuggled closer. The irony wasn't lost on me. Even in her sleep, she reached for me, the husband she had been deceiving for who knows how long. I lay still, unable to move, the weight of the truth pressing down on me. After discovering the painful truth about Julia and Andrew, I felt an overwhelming urge to confront her, to throw it all in her face and demand answers. My heart raced with anger and betrayal, envisioning the scene in my mind, a confrontation filled with tears, accusations, and maybe even a bit of shouting. But as I lay there, staring at the ceiling in the dark, I realized that immediate confrontation wouldn't serve the justice I craved. No, this called for something much more strategic, something that would allow me to regain a sense of power that had been stripped away from me. Instead of letting my emotions dictate my actions, I decided to plot a careful revenge. I wanted to expose the truth, not just to Julia, but to everyone around us, to make her feel the weight of her betrayal publicly. If she thought she could betray me in secret, she was sorely mistaken. I wanted her to squirm, to feel the heat of shame wash over her as the truth unraveled in front of our friends. We had always enjoyed hosting gatherings at our place, inviting friends over for casual evenings filled with laughter, good food, and drinks. It was during one of those gatherings that I decided I would orchestrate my plan. I would gather everyone in one place, create a festive atmosphere, and then reveal the shocking reality of Julia's infidelity. The thought sent a thrill of satisfaction coursing through me. Over the next few days, I began to lay the groundwork for my plan. I started by acting completely normal as if nothing had changed. I helped Julia organize the details of the party, chatting about guest lists and food choices. It was almost surreal to be planning a celebration while knowing the truth lurking beneath the surface, like a predator waiting for the right moment to strike. Every time I caught her gaze, I felt a surge of adrenaline, imagining how she would react when the truth came crashing down on her. I carefully selected the date and the guest list, ensuring that our closest friends would be in attendance. The more, the merrier. I wanted witnesses to the unraveling of her deception, people who would remember that night for the rest of their lives. As the day approached, I spent hours plotting out how I would reveal the truth. I envisioned various scenarios, crafting the perfect moment to drop the bombshell that would shatter the illusion of our perfect life. Would I wait until everyone was laughing, sipping drinks, and enjoying themselves? Or would I interrupt a toast, making the moment even more impactful? The thrill of anticipation made me feel alive, despite the pain I was carrying. With the plan solidifying in my mind, the next step was crucial. I had to invite Andrew. It was an easy decision, almost a necessary one, considering how he played a pivotal role in this unfolding drama. But I needed to be careful. I had to act like I was completely unaware of the affair, as if I were just another host welcoming a friend into our home. I decided to reach out to him directly. I had his number saved from the many times Julia had received messages from him. My heart raced as I typed out the invitation, forcing myself to maintain a calm demeanor. "Hey, Andrew, we're having a little gathering at our place this Saturday. It would be great if you could come by. Let me know." I hit send, and the message lingered in the air, heavy with the potential for chaos. To my surprise, Andrew replied almost immediately. "Sounds great. I'd love to come. Can't wait to catch up." He had no idea what was in store for him, and the thought made my heart race with excitement. Everything was falling into place. As the day of the party approached, I found myself filled with a mix of anxiety and determination. I couldn't help but wonder how Julia would react once she realized I had invited Andrew. Would she sense something was off? Would she try to talk me out of it? The thought of her confusion thrilled me, but I also knew I had to stay calm and collected. On the day of the party, I busied myself with preparations, making sure everything was perfect. The aroma of delicious food filled the air, laughter echoed in the living room, and our friends started arriving. I greeted everyone with a smile, engaging in light-hearted banter, all while keeping an eye on the door, waiting for Andrew's arrival. Finally, he showed up, looking relaxed and cheerful. "Hey, man," he said, clapping me on the back as he entered. "Thanks for the invite." He seemed genuinely happy to be there, and I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction knowing what was about to happen. I welcomed him into our home, introducing him to our friends, and making sure he felt right at home. As the evening wore on, I could see Julia mingling with the guests, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension running through me. Each moment felt electric, charged with the anticipation of what was to come. As the drinks flowed and laughter filled the air, I carefully orchestrated the interactions, positioning Andrew and Julia in the same space without them even realizing the trap I was setting. The stage was set, and as the evening progressed, the atmosphere grew more festive, yet the weight of impending revelation loomed heavy over me. As I watched Julia laughing and chatting with our friends, I couldn't help but think about how she would react when everything was revealed. Would she be shocked, angry, or even remorseful? Or would she try to deflect and deny everything, as she had done before? Whatever the outcome, I knew that the truth would come crashing down soon, and I was ready to watch the fallout unfold. The night was young, and soon, the moment I had been waiting for would arrive. the truth would be revealed. And I would finally reclaim the power that had been taken from me. I could almost taste the victory, the sweet satisfaction of watching Julia's world come crumbling down around her. It was time to set my plan in motion, and nothing would stop me now. The evening unfolded just as I had envisioned, with laughter and chatter filling the air, and a backdrop of music swirling around us like an intoxicating potion. Our friends, glasses raised high, swayed to the rhythm of carefree joy, completely unaware of the tempest brewing beneath the surface. I took a moment to step back and observe. The familiar scene felt like a cruel illusion, a facade that was about to shatter spectacularly. As the night progressed, Julia was vibrant and animated, the life of the party, drawing laughter from everyone around her. I watched her, noting the way her laughter lit up her face, oblivious to the reality lurking just out of view. My heart raced with a mix of excitement and dread, knowing that the truth was on the brink of emerging, and I could feel the anticipation building inside me like a tightly coiled spring. I took a deep breath, feeling the coolness of the glass in my hand. It was now or never. The moment had arrived. I stood up, the clinking of my glass commanding attention as the chatter slowly faded into curious murmurs. "Can I have everyone's attention, please?" I called out, my voice steady but laced with the thrill of what was about to unfold. The room quieted, and eyes turned towards me, expectant and intrigued. I felt a surge of adrenaline course through me, the eyes of our friends fixated on me, waiting for what I would say next. "I'd like to propose a toast," I began, trying to keep my voice light, even as my heart raced. "A toast to honesty and sincerity. In this world where we often wear masks, let's take a moment to celebrate the truth." I could feel the weight of my words settle in the room, the air thickening with tension. I took a moment to lock eyes with Julia. She smiled at me, her expression blissfully unaware of what was coming, and my heart clenched with a mix of anger and pity. Then, I turned my gaze to Andrew, who was standing a few feet away, a slight confusion flickering across his features. "Andrew," I continued, my voice dropping slightly, almost conspiratorial, "you've been a significant part of our lives recently, haven't you?" His brow furrowed as he tried to gauge my tone, but I could see a flicker of realization creeping into his eyes. The room held its breath, a collective tension palpable in the air. "Is there something you'd like to say in front of everyone?" I asked, the question hanging heavy between us like a noose tightening around the truth. For a brief moment, Andrew seemed bewildered, caught off guard by the sudden spotlight. His eyes darted around the room, searching for reassurance, but instead, he was met with a sea of curious, expectant faces. The realization of what was happening began to dawn on him, and I watched as he shifted uneasily on his feet, his confidence wavering under the weight of my gaze and the collective attention of our friends. What do you mean?" he stammered, trying to maintain his composure but failing miserably. His voice trembled slightly, betraying the nervousness that was beginning to bubble to the surface. I couldn't help but feel a surge of satisfaction. This was precisely the reaction I was hoping for. "Come on, Andrew," I pressed, my tone challenging yet calm. "Everyone here knows that you and Julia have been spending quite a bit of time together. Maybe it's time you shared a little of that with the group?" A wave of gasps rippled through the crowd, confusion and curiosity mingling in the air. I could see the realization dawning on some faces, the pieces clicking together as they began to connect the dots. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I leaned into the unfolding drama, savoring the moment like a fine wine. Julia's smile faded as she realized that something was amiss. Her eyes darted between me and Andrew, her expression shifting from confusion to alarm. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice edged with panic as she stepped closer. Instinctively trying to intervene. "Julia, let's not interrupt," I said smoothly, raising my glass again, holding the moment just a second longer. "Andrew, don't you think everyone deserves to know how you two have been spending your time together?" The room had turned into a pressure cooker, and the atmosphere charged with anticipation. Andrew's face drained of color as the weight of the moment pressed down on him. He opened his mouth, clearly struggling to form a coherent response. He stuttered, glancing at Julia for support, but she seemed frozen in place, her hands clasped tightly together. "Just tell them, Andrew," I said, my voice steady, relishing the power I held at that moment. "Be honest. Let's have some sincerity tonight." The tension was unbearable, each passing second stretching into eternity as Andrew fumbled with his words. I could see the gears turning in his mind, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for a lifeline. But there was none to be found, he was trapped in this moment. And there was no escape. Julia stood beside him, her expression a mix of horror and disbelief. "What are you doing?" she finally managed to ask, her voice trembling. I turned to her, the anger simmering just beneath the surface. "I'm giving Andrew the chance to speak, Julia. I think it's time you both faced the truth. You've been living a lie long enough." A flicker of realization crossed her face as she began to piece it all together. "You know?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. And I could hear the cracks forming in her facade. "Yes, I know," I replied coolly, taking a step closer to Andrew, who looked like a deer caught in the headlights. "And I think it's time everyone else knew too." At that moment, the reality of the situation sunk in like a stone dropping into a still pond, sending ripples of shock and disbelief through the crowd. Everyone was silent, eyes wide, waiting for Andrew to break his silence, waiting for the truth to spill out. As I stood there, the atmosphere heavy with anticipation, I couldn't help but feel a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. This was it, the moment of truth. The truth would finally be laid bare, and in just a few heartbeats, everything would change. The room was suffused with a heavy silence, the air thick with tension as everyone waited for Andrew to respond. He shifted uncomfortably, his gaze flickering between Julia and me, panic etched across his features. After what felt like an eternity, he finally blurted out, "Yes, Julia and we've been having an affair." The words hung in the air like a lead balloon, the weight of the truth crashing down on us all. Julia's face paled, her eyes wide with disbelief, and she stood frozen, her mouth slightly agape. I could see the realization of her choices flooding over her, and in that moment, the illusion of our perfect life shattered completely. Gasps echoed around the room, our friends processing the shocking revelation. One by one, they began to move, the realization prompting a collective exodus. Some shook their heads in disbelief, while others simply looked away, unable to face the betrayal. It was surreal to watch, as if the world I had built with Julia was crumbling before my eyes. I turned to her, my heart pounding with a mix of anger and sorrow. "Now it's your life, Julia. This is the reality you've chosen." My voice was steady, but inside, I was a tempest of emotions, grappling with the pain of betrayal and the loss of the life we had built together. Julia's eyes filled with tears, but they felt too late, too little for what had transpired. "Mike, she began, but I cut her off. "I'm done," I stated, my voice firm. "You made your choices, and now you have to live with them." I took a deep breath, my heart heavy but resolute. With one last look at the woman I once loved, I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of finality settle around me. I stepped out into the cool night air, leaving behind the chaos and heartbreak, finally free to reclaim my own life. However uncertain it may now be.